A question I commonly get is, should I indicate more than one potential supervisor when I'm applying? Did you have any? I have no memory of what you did with that, Amie.
Which I think speaks to people who are nervous about applying and that, they may not remember everything you said. No, so I indicated more than one. And I did so purposefully as long as I was interested in more than one supervisor. So I think on all my applications, except for maybe one, I had at least two listed. That partially comes from advice that I got when I was doing my undergrad that, I had reached out to supervisors to say, this is kind of my area. Are you taking students? I'd be interested in working with you. Some I heard back from, some I didn't. But if they've changed their mind, or maybe they've decided to take a year off, or they're pregnant or whatever. What if they're not taking a student anymore and you didn't list anyone else? So I like the idea of listing two. I don't know how that comes across on your side of things when you're looking at the application, but I always thought that it was good to have two just in case.
Yeah, I generally think similarly, that you don't want to list everybody in the program. Now,
Right.
That being said, again, if you want to study parents of kids with severe mental illness and only one faculty member at the institution does that work, just list Dr. Smith, because she's the only one who does this work. Cool. Be honest. If you're more flexible, oftentimes there's a single faculty member that you're most drawn to. So sometimes I'll see folks who say I'm particularly interested in working with Dr. So-and-so. She does this. It's really cool, blah, blah, blah. And then sort of focused on that. And then they'll say, well, I am really interested in working with Dr. So-and-so. I think there's other research that Dr. Y and Dr. Z is working on, or Dr. Y's research on this thing, or Dr. Z's research on that other thing. That would also be really cool. Blah, blah, blah. So I think it just sort of keeps the door open for other folks to consider you.
Yeah.
And that's really how I experience it on my end. And I've definitely taken students on both sides of that. Students who have primarily indicated me, and students who have sort of secondarily or tertiarily indicated me. Part of it is also that this is a little bit of a different side of it, but that sometimes I'll, again, this gets back to not being up to date on our websites, that I'm in the middle of a project that is new and is a spinoff of other stuff. And so applicants don't even know that this topic is taking up a lot of my life. And so I would love to have somebody who's interested in this stuff, but they don't have any way to see that. Or it could be, I have several projects that are half done. So they haven't been published. So a person might not necessarily know that I started developing this thing or doing this thing. And somebody popping up who's interested in this type of a thing, they would never know I am as well. But if they popped up, they're oh my God, I would love to, I really want to get back into this, but just I didn't have any students that were interested at the time. And, so I just and so other things pulled my attention, but this thing is still really compelling and whatever. And I would love to have someone so I could dive back into that. So I think that by listing a couple of names, to be honest, I don't look at, if I'm on a committee that needs to, then I will, but if it's just me looking for my potential supervisees, I don't look at every single applicant, so depending on the year and what I'm, I might just look at the applicants who indicate me as one of their potential supervisees. So
you might not even see an application you'd be interested in.
Right.
If you weren't listed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think having a couple of, having that sort of really want to work with Dr. Smith, but and there's also some work that this person, it just sort of, and keeps those doors open a little bit.
Right. I've had this question from students before about listing more than one supervisor. Would you ever or not you particularly, but people in general, do they ever take offense to be listed as number 2 or number 3? Would that ever be potentially an issue if you weren't listed as the first?
Yeah,
option?
so I've never heard that, I don't think. So I would say that the vast majority of folks would not be.
Right.
How could I say this? If somebody is really offended by that, you might not want to work with them.
That is exactly what I have said to students. I think that indicates something to you about how that relationship would play out.
So it's either their insecurities or whatever, or it's maybe representative of a competitiveness among faculty in that given program.
Oh, interesting.
But that's interesting because so I can honestly say that in our program, I don't feel that at all. I don't know why. could absolutely see contexts where I could see fact, like I'm not above it. I'm not above jealousy or vindictiveness or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've never felt like, yeah, there isn't that. I mean, to be honest, I feel like it's quite the opposite often, where I've had students who I'm like, I would be really interested in working with that student. And there's somebody, one of my colleagues is also really interested. And like they're a newer colleague, or
Mm.
something like that. And so I'll say, oh, you go ahead. And then if for whatever reason you decide not to offer them, let me know. But I sort of like,
Right.
go ahead, So I think, and I've had
Right.
people do that to me as well. So, I think that it's much more of a like, how can we support each other and get students in the best place possible?
Right.
So anyway, get back to your question. I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure that there are some people who might be offended, but if you have to tap dance around for tiptoe around that in your application, then I don't know if they'd be a good person you'd want to spend the next 5 years with or whatever.